Hey, Norma Ray. Welcome to another round of Collection Connection, the game where we talk about two different records, challenge you to figure out the thematic link between them. I play the game with my brother, Plastic Eric, who's on the Plastic Soundwave Cult channel. That's where he does his records. He presents an album from his record collection every Monday, and I show one from mine every Thursday. Sometimes the link is diabolical. Sometimes it's insultingly easy because we don't always have the time to think of something inspired before we have to turn it around. Ultimately, though, it is primarily an excuse to talk about records and to share our love of music. Today we will be forging a connection between an all-time hard rock classic, AC/DC's Back in Black from 1980, and the sophisticated synth pop duo Pet Shop Boys and their 1993 album, Very. That'll be coming up in a moment, but first I need to officially reveal the connection between the prior pair of albums, Back in Black and Robbie Robertson's eponymous solo debut from 1987. And that connection is that each album contained a tribute song to a passed away former band member. In Robbie Robertson's case, it was the song Fallen Angel, which was written for his literal bandmate in the band, Richard Manuel. And in AC/DC's case, the album Back in Black, and more specifically the title track from the album, were written as tribute to Bon Scott, who had passed away shortly before they started putting together their follow-up to their breakthrough album, Highway to Hell. He passed away, and within a couple of months, they had replaced him with Brian Johnson and started their recordings on Back in Black. So that was the connection. It was guessed by Zepp Pearl, and you can check out his latest video where he is talking about his experience with the album and shows from Yes, the 902, I want to say 90210, and now that I got 90210 in my head, I can't think of the actual name of the album, but the one with all the numbers that didn't sound like all the other Yes albums, with Owner of a Lonely Heart on it, 90125. And you can check that out on his channel, Zepp Pearl. So with that, let's get on with the show. Alright, so Eric talked about Back in Black, and there's probably nothing too much I can tell you about that album. It's a classic, sold a whole lot of copies. The most interesting thing that I can say about it, first, I have the same remaster that Eric has. I have a couple of AC/DC records. That's one of them. And I find it interesting that it is the number 4, I believe, best-selling album in the US, but worldwide, Back in Black is the second best-selling album of all time, which is remarkable. It's got 50 million in sales, and I just wanted to point out, just because I thought it was interesting, that the Eagles, their greatest hits album, which is the best-selling album in the US, is so much a US phenomena. I don't know if it was just not released around the world or not, but its global sales of 44 million copies, more than 85% of that comes from the US sales, certified sales of over 38 million. And between the US and Canada, where there's another 2 million in sales logged, over 90% of its sales are just from the US and Canada. So the Eagles slipped down the global chart a little bit, a few slots, while the 25 million certified copies sold of Back in Black in the US only accounts for 50% of the number of copies sold. So it has 50 million in global sales. I thought that was interesting. I will point out that Back in Black was AC/DC's first album to go to number 1, both in their home country of Australia and in the UK. And this is also true of the Pet Shop Boys, their home country, which happens to be the same as the UK. Very, in 1993, surprisingly, was their first album to go to number 1. Every other album had just failed to reach it, ending at number 2 or number 3 on the chart, but Very was the first to go to number 1. This is not the connection. I wanted to point that out. And there's also a single color aspect to Back in Black and Very. on the cover that is also not the Connection, but there is a little bit of white on the Back in Black cover, so it's not just one color, even though it is predominantly one color. But Back in Black is full of songs that you know, full of classic songs. It's got Hell's Bells, You Shook Me All Night Long, Rock and Roll, Ain't Noise Pollution, and of course the title track, Back in Black. And most of the rest of the album is solid as well. And so I don't have a ton to say about it, but it's a classic. I thought about trying to connect to another best-selling of all time albums, but the closest next one that I had was the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, and that was down at number 11. Didn't feel quite close enough to match up to number 2, so I didn't go that direction for a connection. Nonetheless, let us move on to the connection. So then the album that I'm connecting it to is from the Pet Shop Boys, as previously mentioned. Very, from 1993. This was their 5th album and came on the heels of Behavior, which was sort of their mature album. Didn't really have a whole lot of bops on it, and although I loved Being Boring, especially the intro on that album, it's a very sedate album, it feels like, overall, and was the record in some ways that took synth pop into full maturity. Very brought some of the fun back into it, like with their cover of Go West, the Village People song that closes the album. I love that. Pet Shop Boys seem to have a knack for doing some pretty outstanding covers of surprising material, where Chris Lowe had to convince Neil Tennant to even do the cover. I think Neil was a little wary on it, thought it was maybe a little too camp, but Chris Lowe pointed out that it has the chord progression from Pachelbel's Canon in D, and that was enough to sort of sway Neil Tennant to do this great cover of Go West. But a lot of the songs, let's see, I wouldn't normally do this kind of thing. It's a lot of fun. One of my favorites on there, Yesterday, When I Was Mad, and a lot of songs that bring some of the fun of the Pet Shop Boys back after the maturity of Behavior. I also didn't realize that Ann Dudley's fingerprints were on this album a little bit, going back to The Art of Noise that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. She contributes some orchestrations and things on the very album. I don't remember exactly which tracks, but I think 3 different tracks she's on, so a little connection there to a recent album that we discussed. But beyond that, it's really the last album where I was in step with Pet Shop Boys. I have a couple from after this period, Bilingual and Release, but those are the only 2 that I bought, and I never got as familiar with them as I am with those first 5 records. And this edition that I'm holding up here was from a series they did some remasters and titled it The Further Listening in 2001, where they had a very nicely curated bonus disc put onto a second disc for each of their albums. And I think it's excellent, but that means that I wasn't sure if I had the original CD release still. I had bought it, but I dug through my stuff and I do have it. And it had the very unique, I don't know that I've ever seen this anywhere else, where the CD, the jewel case itself, was molded in order to have the name of the band and the title just molded into it. So the packaging itself sort of became the art. But that didn't translate to other editions necessarily. The LP has never had a hard case cover like that. It just used one of the illustrations, kind of a repeating pattern inside of Neil and Chris in some kind of funky helmets as a cover. But I really think that makes the original, so I'm glad I did hold on to it. I wasn't sure it's something that I replaced in 2001. I have occasionally gotten rid of duplicates over time, but apparently I did not get rid of this duplicate. So I'm glad that I have both here on hand. But it's a great record from 1993 from the Pet Shop Boys. Hit number 1, as I mentioned, in the UK, their first time doing so. And I don't know if it was much of a hit here. That was the number one there is what really kind of stuck with me. But it seemed like the U.S. had kind of moved on from things like the Pet Shop Boys in 1993, but I was still a fan. And I think it's really a worthwhile record. It's a lot of fun, and I would definitely recommend it. And so with that, I will throw Very from 1993, the Pet Shop Boys, over to my brother, over to Eric, and he will find a connection on Monday and put out a video about that. And in the meantime, if you think that you know what the connection is between AC/DC's Back in Black and the Pet Shop Boys' Very albums, leave that guess down in the comments. The first right answer will get a shout out in the next video. I think Eric will be able to do that. In the meantime, that's all I have. So I thank you for watching. Bye-bye.